Hi everyone, welcome to episode 26 of the Startup Playbook podcast. My name is Rohit Bhargava, and each week I interview successful founders, investors, and subject matter experts on how they got started, the strategies they use to succeed, and their advice to current and future entrepreneurs. In this episode, I interview Nathan Chan, the founder and editor-in-chief of Foundr Magazine. Foundr Magazine is an online publication dedicated to young and aspiring entrepreneurs, and now, through its blog, podcasts, and workshops, has become one of the pre-eminent resources for young entrepreneurs looking to educate themselves on how to build successful businesses. In this interview, Nathan shares how to set goals, staying ahead of competition, and how to build a network of influencers. Without further ado, here is my interview with Nathan Chan. Hi Nathan, welcome to the Startup Playbook podcast, and thanks for taking the time to be here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Rohit. It's an absolute pleasure, brother.
You're quite well known, especially for Foundr Magazine. But for those listeners that may not be as familiar with you or your background, can you share a little bit of your story and what got you here today?
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks for the kind words around being well known. I think that's hardly the case, man. I just like to work on cool stuff. But I guess I started the magazine March 2013. It's a digital magazine called Foundr, and it's on the App Store and Google Play Store. And I started while I was working my day job. Didn't think it was going to be this big media startup or anything of the sort. Just treated it as a little passion project on the side. And when I launched it, the first day I launched it, I made $5 on the App Store. The first amount of money I've ever made online. And I just fell in love with the process. And the reason I started it was because I felt there wasn't really a publication in the space that really spoke to aspiring and young novice stage entrepreneurs and founders. And I felt that myself as an aspiring entrepreneur, that I didn't really have a source or a trusted brand that I could relate to. And that's what I am creating right now with Foundr. I'm just trying to scratch my own itch. And as time has gone on, we've become much more than a magazine. Essentially built a platform, a multifaceted platform across the podcast, across the blog, across our social channels, across premium content, whether that's training, whether that's a membership site, whether that's just a magazine, you name it. So we're developing really an ecosystem more than anything. It's much more than a magazine. But yeah, that's how it all started, man. And it certainly wasn't easy. A lot of struggles still to this day, and still it is struggle town. But we've had a lot of wins too, which has been really cool and really rewarding, and we've built up quite an amazing community over the past few years, and our content is consumed by at least 1 million plus every single month.
Wow, that's a pretty impressive number. I want to sort of come back to some of the things that you're doing now, and obviously what you've grown Foundr into. But you mentioned that when you first started back in 2013. You were still kind of working full-time at that time, and this was very much almost like a side project. How did that kind of evolve from you, keeping that as a side project to turning that and going that full-time? What was that sort of stage that you said, okay, I kind of have to dedicate more time towards making this real?
Yeah. Well, I said to myself, because I was looking really to do work that fulfilled me at the same time. I was working in a job at a travel company doing IT support, and it wasn't really fulfilling for me. I loved the company, I loved the culture, but the work itself wasn't me. And I just said to myself, okay, I'm going to launch this magazine. I think there's something here. This is my first business. I don't know whether it will work. I know for a fact there's nothing out there like this right now. There's some hybrids, there's some similar things going on, but for the most part, I think we can carve something out. And yeah, I just launched it and just said to myself, I'm going to give it 12 months. I'll give it a good hard crack over 12 months. And, by that 12 months, I'll make a call whether I can the project or what. And what happened, Rohit, was I launched the magazine. And it was like, okay, the first issue's out. Wow, all right, now we got subscribers. Even if it's only a few, like a handful in the first few days, well, these people are paying for a monthly subscription. We got to work on that next monthly issue. And what happened was I just got caught up on this in this content hamster wheel, which some people can say that this content hamster wheel can be quite daunting if you think about having to produce a magazine every single month. But I got used to being in that wheel, and I got used to putting systems in place and finding leverage, and just trying to make the magazine the best it possibly could be every single month. Still, while I had my day job. And because it's a subscription-based business model, the beautiful thing is recurring can be quite strong, and it's very predictable. So I could see every single month our recurring was going up, and the monthly revenue and income for the business in terms of subscriptions was going up. So I could start to predict that I was onto something, and I could actually map out on our growth rate that I could cover operating costs, and I could be able to leave and go full time on this thing, and cover operating costs and pay myself a salary. And it was about, I think, 4 months in that I worked out that that I was onto something and I could do something with it.
Sure. Were there anything that you did specifically to get your first $5 in the door?
Yeah, launch.
Which is often overlooked, right? Like, a lot of people just kind of wait and want to get it perfect, and kind of delay it for 6 months to a year.
Yeah, and the reason I say launch, Rohit, is not the fact that we shipped. It was more around the fact that we shipped on a platform with buyers, right? Like, it's so underrated, I think. Launching something on a platform with buyers. Like, I'm not to say that there's anything profound or anything game changing if you've never started a business and you launch an ebook on the Amazon store. But there's buyers there. There's a massive marketplace. If you create a physical product, a game changing physical product, and there's nothing out there like this that exists right now, and you launch it on Amazon, like, there's a strong possibility that you will find buyers on your first day of launching it. You do not need social media. You do not need, an audience. The audience is there on that marketplace, and that's how we got our first set of customers. In fact, that's how we got our first set of customers. Thousands upon thousands of people not doing any traditional marketing or any marketing whatsoever, except focusing on the product for at least a good 6 to 12 months, because I didn't have the time when I was working my day job to worry about social media, or to worry about blogging, or to worry about guest posting, or worry about podcasting, or any of the sort. So all these things that you see us do now didn't exist for a year before I left my day job.
Sure. That's super, super interesting. Like, obviously, I was just having a look at your Instagram account on my phone. It's 903,000 followers. How has that kind of evolved over time as well? So obviously you kind of touched on it at the very early stage. I assume that there were other sort of magazines that were available on iTunes and through the channels that you were selling from. How did you kind of, I guess, stand out apart from, or when people weren't as familiar with you or with the Foundr brand at that time?
Yeah, there was one channel that I focused on, and I found it just so happened that it was the channel that was relevant to us, and that was App Store optimization. So that was the only channel I focused on for 1 year when I launched the magazine. I just focused on App Store optimization. So anyone that was searching for entrepreneur, Fast Company, Forbes, Inc., you name it, Fortune, anything, startups, Foundr, anything, Foundr with the E, not our spelling, not the branded term, but the correct spelling. Any of those terms, we still to this day rank for in the App Store, and that still drives us a ton of traffic to that app. So that's all I focused on. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess the next part of that is, at the very early stage, especially when you're trying to launch a digital magazine, there's so much content that you've got to create. And as you mentioned, sometimes people get overwhelmed with the amount of work that they have to do. How did you sort of bridge that gap of creating all of that content and potentially the early stages of forming that team around you?
Yeah. With full transparency, Rohit, it was myself, our designer in India, who I still work with to this day, Karen Jane. He's amazing. And then it was my mum. My dad used to help with some stuff, and I used to call in some favors with a couple of friends, and 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 that's how I did it. And the magazine, still to this day, it's only maximum 70 pages magazine with around maximum 8 to 10 articles. It's not a big, meaty, 200-page magazine that has 20 to 30, maybe even 40 articles. We've always done it in bite size. You can consume it in 2 hours. That's how we've always done it. 2 to 3 hours, you can kick back and consume it in a month. So yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah. So I guess the how big's the team now that you've got?
There is 7 of us full time.
Cool.
And they have a string of contractors and part timers as well.
Sure. How did you find the first, the first hires outside of your local kind of relying on friends and family to get the first few issues done? What was the next sort of transition in that growth phase for you? And when did you make that decision that it was time to kind of look at bringing external people in?
Yeah. So between now and early last year was when we made our first hire, and that was Jonathan. He heads up content for us, and I think the way that I worked out who to hire next and when it was time was, I think you just have these pains in your business that they become more and more painful as time goes on in terms of resources or wanting to do things or getting things done. And also you as a CEO, you need to get as much leverage as possible. So to hire Jonathan, it was a natural inclination because I'm not a writer, and we needed to start creating epic content on the blog because for a long time, Rohit, we actually did not even have a blog, which is really crazy thinking of it back then. Like now, it's only been the past 1.5 years that we've actually had a decent website. We've had a blog. We've actually wrote content on the site. So that was the first natural inclination, and I've just kind of gone on as a stepping stone, and just people just seem to come to us naturally when we need someone. It's only now that we've got a few roles in particular that we're looking for, in particular in like design, also email marketing and automation, and then also PPC, that we actually are having to go out and look to fill those roles. But otherwise, to be honest, it's just kind of naturally happened where there's been people in the community or, friends of friends or, people that I've worked with previously that are looking for work that I know are just A players, and they've just kind of joined us at a full-time capacity. But it's just been a natural inclination. But it really comes down to that pain point and, how much output you have, because we're a content powerhouse, right? For us, a big part of it, as I described before around the content hamster wheel, a big part of it is output. And for us, it has to be quality content at scale. So the more quality content that we put out, the faster the brand will grow, as long as it's really, really good stuff. It's super quality. And there's a fine balance that we have to play, but that's how we grow. So in order for us to, keep up that consistency, we have to just keep building upon that.
Sure. And so you mentioned at the start of the podcast that obviously now you have the blog, you have the podcast, you have the magazine, you have various other channels that you have. And I guess a lot of early stage startup founders, they have that kind of big vision of wanting to do everything. How did you, was that always kind of the vision for you? And then how did you kind of hone that down? Or was it always kind of magazine first and then we'll kind of expand from there for you?
Yeah, I'm a little different, Rohit, in that sense that, to be honest, man, I never had no big visions when I first started. I just wanted to focus on the magazine, and I consider when I look at the way that I'm building Foundr as like building a house brick by brick. And yeah, I do have big visions now, but back then I didn't. And I'm just kind of slowly navigating through it all. We do have a lot of things that I want to do now, and I need to step it back. In fact, I need to cut and refine and simplify things more than ever, because we have a lot of opportunities, have a lot of things going on. But in the early days, no, I didn't have a big vision. But the way I work it out on what to do next, like what does 2017 look like for Foundr, I I'm constantly thinking. This is an obsession for me. And at the start of 2017, I will just brain dump a list of things that I think are important to us, that are crucial to keep the brand relevant, to keep it growing, to keep our promise of everything that we do. And then I'm just going to just refine it, and we're going to do like a retreat with the team, and we're just going to brainstorm it all and workshop it, and then we'll plan out all of 2017. And if it's not on our goals for 2017, doesn't get at it. Simple as that.
Sure. So yeah, like that was kind of leads into my next question. So something I know I've personally struggled with, and I've seen a lot of other people struggle with as well, is saying no to opportunities, and always kind of jumping at the next kind of thing that comes up. And something that I've kind of seen from that process is that saying no is almost as important as saying yes to the right thing. How do you kind of decipher on A, setting the goals, and then B, deciding whether something is the right next move for Foundr or for you or not?
It's a great question. In terms of goals, I have two kinds of goals. One, in terms of growth of the company in terms of a monetary value, and then growth of the company in terms of an impact value. So how many people are consuming our content, how many people come to the site, how big's our reach, how many people we're helping. So I constantly set at the start of every year big audacious goals for those two metrics, and then I track them backwards. So I use this formula that a mentor taught me. It's called a goal pyramid. It's by a guy called Matthew Michaelowicz. And at the top pillar, so you break your goals down into pillars. So the top goal, this is the number one goal. So those two metrics that I told you about, they're at the top pillar, and then underneath there's two more pillars. Then underneath that there's three more pillars, and then underneath that there's four more pillars. And then underneath that there's five pillars. So you have all your sub goals that will lead to that top goal. So I just decide, what I think is reasonable in terms of turnover for the company, and what I think is reasonable, and it's a stretch, and it would be a celebration if we can hit that target in terms of impact and how many people are consuming our content. And then I have these sub goals underneath. So in order to reach, let's say, 10 million entrepreneurs every single month, how many people do we need to have on our email newsletter? How many people do we need to have coming to the site? How big does our social media channels need to be? How many backlinks do we need to and guest posts do we need to do? How many partnerships do we need to lock down? How many listeners do we need of the podcast? How many readers do we need of the magazine? How many people do we need purchasing X, Y, and Z products? How many subscribers do we need to this product? And I work it all back. And then in regards to if any opportunities that come around, unless they can help me get closer to any of those goals that I've listed at the start of the year and that I committed to, and so did the team, then we say no.
Sounds pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
When you put it like that. But so I guess obviously with anything successful, as Foundr has been, specifically on platforms like Instagram, for example, where you're totally dominating. I'm sure that there are kind of a bunch of people that would want to copy the formula that if you could call it that, what Foundr's created. How do you when you're successful, and when people are trying to replicate what it is that you're doing, how do you stay ahead of the competitors in a crowded market or a crowded platform like Instagram?
Yeah, this is a good one, because it's something that I was thinking about the other day. Someone asked me this question, and they were really worried because a new competitor entered the space. And we've had many copycats, even just of the Foundr brand, dude, where you see like very, and we make no claims to the red R and all that kind of stuff, and remove the noun, sorry, not the noun, the vowel, remove the vowel from a word or anything like that. Like, I make no claims, but there has been some blatantly obvious copies of doing a magazine, exact replica website, similar naming, similar space, similar marketing strategy tactics around everything that we do. But here's the thing, right? I'm always looking for what we could do as to bring the platform to build this platform. Essentially, I'm always looking, what can we add, what assets can we add, what things can we do that I think are cool, that are a value add to our community, to this space that we're serving, that is going to be epic, and it's going to provide value, and we're going to use technology to do a lot of the work for us. So they're assets that constantly produce views, that constantly produce value for other people. So it's, we just keep adding more gears to the machine so it runs even faster and more effectively, and provides more value to people. So remember how I was talking about, the building blocks, of building a house. When I look at it, if we can track it back, the first thing that we did was the magazine. That's not that revolutionary, if you want to be honest. Let's call a spade a spade. There's plenty of magazines, business magazines out there. So what did we do to differentiate ourselves with the magazine? One, we created a magazine that was straight to the point with super actionable content, so much to the point that the end of the magazine, it has action items from all the articles in that issue. And we had a unique design about it. Design can be a great way to have a unique differentiator about your brand and your product or your service. And then another thing we did was we played a big emphasis on, I guess, the story that we were telling. And then, we started to get interviews with all of these hard to reach people, so much to the point that, we get interviews at the same caliber of an entrepreneur, Fast Company, Forbes, Fortune, etc., etc. And then the next piece of that puzzle was, okay, we've got this digital magazine. We're outranking all of the top magazines in the App Store. What happens next? Okay, well, let's create a podcast. Let's repurpose that content. So then, we get all these interviews, and now we've got quite a a lot of people listen to our podcast. We have a decent audience on our podcast channel. And then, okay, what happens next? All right, well, now we need to build a blog. We need to start driving traffic to the site. So now we're producing quality content on the blog at scale, nowhere near as fast as I'd like. I want at least 15 high quality articles going out per week. This is like 2,500 word plus articles. We're nowhere near that. We get about 3 to 4 a week if we're lucky. And that's a work in progress. But, the more and more epic content we produce, those are assets that are creating and doing the work for us. Same with the podcast, same with the magazine. Technology is doing the work. Okay, then what happens next? All right, we're going to focus on crushing it on social. The first platform of that was Instagram. It's taken us close to 2 years now, Rohit, to build up that following, which is of close to 1 million people. We've produced 15 to 20 different lead magnets that are super in depth. These are like free ebooks and guides on anything around entrepreneurship. We've produced 45 back issues of the magazine, because we've been running the magazine for 3.5 years. Now we're working on this physical coffee table book, which compiles the best of the past 3.5 years worth of content that we've produced, and there's nothing out there that exists right now. So that's another asset that we're producing. Then we're going to start producing all this video content. So you can see, every single day we're producing content so that nobody can just spring out of nowhere and have as much valuable content as us, and doing, and disrupting, or not necessarily disrupting, but getting good cut through in certain channels. And that's how I'm constantly thinking about it. How can we stay ahead of the game? Another thing that I want to do is set up an office in LA, build a team in LA around content, around video production, and I want to produce courses at scale. At the end of the day, I want to be producing one course every single day, and taught by experts in all sorts of different fields. And that's another way where we can get this competitive advantage where no one is, and that's how we keep adding to the platform brick by brick. So, now to nowhere, no one's just going to come in and, have all these things that we have, because we've spent a lot of time, just chipping away at it, just brick by brick. And, it's a lot of work.
Speaking of experts and influencers that you've worked with, I think Richard Branson was on your 8th issue. Is that right?
Yep.
How did and I get these, to a very a much lower degree. I get asked a similar question of, how do you have access to this sort of network? How did you sort of go about reaching people of the caliber of Richard Branson and some of the other people that you've profiled in your magazine?
Having magazine is really key, because it's a great influence building tool, and it's even more powerful than a book. A lot of people release books to build their personal brand. Like this Foundr book they're working on for Kickstarter, like this Kickstarter pre-sale launch that we're doing. It's a Foundr branded book. It's not Nathan Chan or anything, but a lot of people launch books as a way to build their personal brand, because it's a big authority play. Well, magazines are even more powerful. So that was the start. That was something that I worked out very quickly. But then, once we got that big break with Richard Branson, then it's been easier, and we've built up a platform and an audience. And if I send an email, and people still say no, like we approached Slack's team. We wanted to interview the founder of Slack, Stuart Butterfield. And, we said, it was a great email. And I said, we'll feature on the front cover of the magazine, 100,000 listeners on the podcast, every single month, email out to our database, of course, to 300,000, social media, in particular, one of the largest business-related accounts on Instagram. We can repurpose this onto our blog. We can repurpose this onto our Huffington Post and Entrepreneur column. 20,000, 25,000 readers monthly of the magazine. I threw all these numbers out, and I tried to make it a no-brainer, but they still said now's not the right time. So, these are the kind of things that I'm constantly pitching for and doing to try and, convince that person or that PR person or that gatekeeper that it's a good, mutually beneficial exchange in value. So I'm always looking for the mutually beneficial exchange in value. It's not how can I get this person's time and I win. It's how can they win by getting on our platform and growing whatever they're doing.
Absolutely. And speaking of kind of winning at things, you've got a kind of a new book that you kind of mentioned that you were launching on Kickstarter. Do you want to share a little bit of what the book's about and details for Kickstarter?
Yeah, sure thing. So we're working on this book. I think it's going to be it will be the best, like probably the greatest body of work at Foundr that we've produced thus far, because it compiles, thousands of hours. We've produced thousands upon thousands of hours worth of content. We've, interviewed and featured the likes of, Richard Branson, Arianna Huffington, Seth Godin, Gary Vee, Tim Ferriss, Barbara Corcoran, David John. The list goes on. Some of the greatest entrepreneurs of our generation. There's so much content out there. There's so much noise. And in a sense, we are contributing to that noise. So we wanted to create a best of kind of greatest hit series, but we were going to distill it down into super actionable items where we've broken it down with advice from the best in the world, around idea validation, team building, getting funding, raising capital, you name it, starting a business, finding something you're passionate about. Any question that you had around business, we've compiled into this book with insights from the best in the world, and it's going to be a beautifully designed coffee table book. But the coolest thing is we're not just going to create it and launch it. We're actually crowdfunding it on Kickstarter, and we're going to involve the community and help the community bring it to life, because we do have such an amazing community at Foundr, and I think this is just a really great book to get people involved and allow other people to bring it to life. And I'd love for anyone to back the campaign. I think you'd love the book. And you can go to Foundr Mag, FOUNDRMAG.com/book.
Perfect. I'll make sure that I put the links up. Nathan, when does the Kickstarter campaign go live?
November 15th.
November 15th. Perfect. So, watch out for the date and make sure that you check out the show notes, and all of the links will be there. Nathan, mindful of your time, thanks a lot for sharing your insights and the story with Foundr on today's show. For anyone that wants to get in touch, follow the story, follow Foundr, what's the best way for them to do that?
You can just go to our site, foundr.com, Foundr.com. And I'd love to hear from you. You can email me at nathan@foundrmag, Foundrmag.com. And here to help however I can.
Awesome. Nathan, once again, thanks a lot for your time and for sharing your insights.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Rohit. Absolute pleasure, brother.
Thanks for listening to episode 26 of the Startup Playbook podcast. You can find the show notes of my interview with Nathan, along with a curated list of tools and resources for startup founders at startupplaybook.co. As always, you can join the conversation through our Twitter account. The handle is @PlaybookStartup. In the next episode, I interview Brett Adam. Brett is the Managing Director for Australia and New Zealand and VP of Engineering at Zendesk. Brett has over 25 years of experience in the software industry, with a background that includes CEO and CTO level positions in both public and private companies. In the meantime, don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date with our latest episodes. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you at episode 27 next week.